Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we've got a good show for you this week after the All-Star game. We've got a couple games to cover before that, and then obviously the Ducks just took on the Boston Bruins, so we'll cover that as well. Plenty of fan questions, some updates on the lineup, some injury news on Gibson we'll get to and talk about, and an upcoming watch party as well that we will discuss and mention. So with that, on the last show, we had talked about the Ducks and how well they were doing. They had beaten Pittsburgh. They had beaten Los Angeles. And we had talked about the Ducks and the hunt for the playoff race as far as the wild card and the Pacific Division, Eddie. And so the Ducks then went in to face the Sharks, and we talked about a big game, 2 points. You know, you got to win these, and they end up losing this game. But it was kind of a weird game, Eddie, because the Ducks, they didn't play that poorly. They did take a little bit too many penalties, and they gave up a couple power play goals against, but it was just a weird game. The Ducks started out playing well, controlling the puck, getting chances. You know, they even outshot the Sharks this game, but they got down 3-0 in this game, by the middle of the second period. They fought back, got a couple goals, but then the Sharks added another 3 in the third, and the Ducks ended up losing. But kind of an unusual game, Eddie. The Ducks still played well like they had against Pittsburgh and the Kings, but they ended up not pulling this one out.
Yeah, it's one of those weird games where, you know, you look at the way the Ducks played through the entire game, the way they controlled 5-on-5 play throughout the majority of this game, if not the entire game, and then you go and you look at the scoreline, and they end up losing 6-2, and it's just one of those weird ones. I mean, I don't think they played an awful game. If you take out the fact they lost 6-2, I think they played really well at 5-on-5 for the most part. But this wasn't Gibson's strongest game. He let in a couple soft ones, especially one of the goals against Mikhail Bodker kind of just went under his arm, and it was a real soft one on him. And I mean, I guess he's due for that type of game, really. I mean, he's been great for the Ducks the entire season, so you're bound to have one of these at some point. But I think the most disappointing thing is the team it came against. I mean, this is a team the Ducks are fighting for to get into the Pacific Division, to get into the playoffs, and to give up 2 points to this team and lose in regulation, it's just disappointing. And now we look at the standings now, the Ducks are tied with San Jose in points, and the San Jose is about 2 or 3 games in hand, and this is a game that could come back to bite them come the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the time of the show right now, you look at the Pacific Division, and all the California teams are tied in terms of points, as you mentioned. San Jose's got a couple games in hand. Los Angeles has a game in hand. This game was a huge 4-point game. The Ducks could have been at 61 points technically right now, and San Jose at 57. So, and don't forget Calgary. They've, still in the mix there. They're at 58 points. So you got this log jam of everybody fighting it out, with Vegas, of course, on the top still. So anybody can go in this division. It's going to be a wild finish in the West as the Ducks battle the other California teams in Calgary for, second and third, and then maybe someone else gets in there as the wild card. We don't know. Obviously, with the Central Division being tough as well. So, like we talked about, this was an important game. The Ducks, you want to get the 2 points against your division rivals, and you want to try and do it in regulation. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. Like you said, I think Gibson didn't have one of his best games. The Ducks' penalty kill wasn't the best either. They gave up 2 goals on 5 chances. And it's just a game that the Ducks have to move on from, Eddie, as they go in the rest of the week against the Rangers and the Jets.
Yeah, and I think discipline was a major factor in the reason the Ducks lost this game as well. They took a lot of bad penalties, and of course it came back to hurt them. Like you said, San Jose scored on 2 of their 5 power plays. But yeah, I think this is a game you can draw off of. The Ducks play San Jose in about 5 or 6 games from now. So I think you can look back on this one, and they're going to look back on and say, we played pretty well for the majority of the game. And it was just kind of one of those days where, you do a lot of things right, and then you end up losing the game 6-2. I mean, it doesn't happen often, and I think they're pretty unlucky in this game, so they can look back on what they did wrong. Of course, when they come into play again, you would assume if Gibson's healthy, he'll be in net, and I'm sure he'll be looking for revenge in the next one.
And I think what's interesting about this game, too, is the response afterwards by Carlisle. You and I talked about Perry on the last show, and we said, he's not doing as well. Is he going to put him on the fourth line? We were kind of like, well, he could, but we don't know. And lo and behold, what happens after this game? Carlisle changes all the right wing spots, which you and I we touched on the last show. We weren't sure. We were thinking, how is he going to really adjust this with the players? You know what I mean? And obviously, we talked about the trade deadline and getting other forwards and how the lineup's kind of, full right now. So it happened. He goes and he puts Perry on the fourth line, and we were like, oh, okay, he really did what we were talking about. So that part was one of the interesting moves. He then puts Coste on the top line. So that we kind of get that part. Then the next part to this, which is kind of surprising, and people are like, what? Is he moves Silverberg off the Kessler-Cogliano line, moves him down to the third line, then puts Brown on that line. So now you're sitting here going, okay, how is this going to work? And actually, it works pretty well, Eddie, as we've seen, because the Ducks go on. They beat the Rangers, the Jets, and the Bruins. We're going to talk about all of them. But first, they go into the game against the New York Rangers, and Brown scores right off the bat in the first 3 minutes. This game was a little bit back and forth in the first period, a really wild first period. If you went to the game and saw it, the Rangers actually played pretty good in this period, but the Ducks end up getting 4 goals in this period. We see Corey Perry gets a goal on the power play. Cogliano scores. Henrique, we'll talk about him. He's been on fire. He gets a shorthanded goal. A very entertaining and another weird period, Eddie. Probably one that the Rangers felt that they, should have gotten some more goals. But the Ducks come out of that period 4-2, 6 goals in the first period. The Rangers do get one back in the second. Make it a close game, pull within one. The Ducks are able to get a couple in the third period, one early on, Raquel on the power play, 30 seconds in the third period. But the Ducks pulled out this game. But another interesting game, Eddie. All the lineup changes, the way the play went. Even the Rangers outshot the Ducks, but the Ducks pulled out this game. It's just a weird fashion, but they won this one 6-3.
Yeah, and it was probably the most exciting first period we've seen all season. I mean, obviously, the Ducks coming out on top 4-2 is makes it a little bit better to see it was kind of back and forth and a lot of action in that one. But yeah, I think it was a good effort. Obviously, John Gibson comes in and has a great bounce back game. He only lets in 3 goals on 44 shots again, so that's a good game for him to rebound after the one against San Jose. And yeah, the offense came alive, and I'm sure Randy Carlisle is patting himself on the back after making all those lineup changes, and the Ducks come into this one and they score 6 goals. But yeah, everything just seemed to click. Perry gets a goal on the power play, so he gets things going for him. J.C. Brown, like you said, he got the first goal of the game with a great shot over Lundqvist's shoulder, and for the Ducks to come into this one and chase Lundqvist in the first period, I mean, that's something you don't see often at all. I mean, Lundqvist hasn't been great this season, but for you to come in and chase him in the first period and get him pulled, that's credit to the way the Ducks came in and prepared to start this game. But yeah, I mean, we talked about the lineup being split up. JT Brown was put on the line with Kessler and Cogliano, and he's done well since becoming a Duck so far. And I mean, I said he wasn't going to be much better than Logan Shaw, and he's proved me wrong. He's come in and been one of the Ducks' best forwards since coming into the lineup, and then obviously, like I said, Perry getting the power play goal, Cogliano gets one, Henrique continues playing well, gets the shorthanded one, and then throwing a goal from Raquel and Getzlaf to finish off the game. So everybody really getting goals in this one.
Yeah, this game was very entertaining. I mean, the first period to see that many goals, I mean, that's something we don't see too often. So he had a lot of that going on. The Ducks also did well on the special teams. They got 2 power play goals on 6 opportunities, which was huge. The faceoff circle, they just dominated. They won 60% of the faceoffs in this game. So definitely a good effort the way the Ducks played. And like you said, too, they knocked out the King. I mean, and not only did they knock him out, they knocked him out in the first period. I mean, that's pretty good. When you can take Lundqvist out early in the game, that's just huge. So this was a game that we talked about that was going to be we thought at least a pretty tough game, and the Ducks ended up with that lineup change. They took out the Rangers, and as we talked about, Carlisle kept those lines together. The Ducks then had another tough opponent, the Jets. The Jets have been doing pretty well, obviously, in the Central Division, battling it out at the top spot up there. And this game, this was one maybe the Ducks could have played a little bit better in just a few areas, but it was a seesaw battle. It seemed like every time somebody scored, then the other team scored. And, the Jets started off the scoring. Henrique got another goal a couple minutes later. As we talked about, he's been on fire. Richie got a goal. Then, of course, the Jets score, and then the Ducks score, and the Jets score. I mean, it's just like back and forth in this game. And the Ducks ended up pulling this one out in the shootout. Very interesting. Gibson did go down. Wheeler incidentally crashed into him, on accident, and looked like Gibson's knee kind of buckled a little bit on the play, so he had to go out. Miller came in. Kind of a weird thing. Miller doesn't face any shots in regulation. He doesn't face any shots in the 3-on-3, but he gets the win. He only faces, the shots in the shootout, which was pretty crazy. They've talked about that. The stat keepers up there are saying that that's only the sixth time it's happened, I guess, according to Elias Sports. So a really crazy stat line there, but the Ducks end up pulling out this one, Eddie, and they get the 2 points in a game that they probably, would have won if not for a few bad turnovers, especially on the first two Jets goals.
Yeah, and this is one of the best teams in the Western Conference, let alone the NHL as well. The Jets have been a big surprise this year and have really dominated the Central Division, which is crazy considering how good the Central Division is. And the Ducks came into this one and just outplayed them. And like you said, other than a few turnovers that led to goals, the Ducks really should have won this game easily. And it's just unfortunate. Obviously it's great to come away with the 2 points, but they made it so difficult for themselves to get the 2 points in this one. The Line goal, bad turnover, Brandon Tanev goal, bad turnover, and even the last goal was off a turnover as well. And this should have been an easier game. The Ducks controlled play 5-on-5 throughout the entire game, and even got better as the game progressed. It's just those bad turnovers that led to goals that hurt the Ducks, and they end up going into a 3-on-3 overtime, and they actually played well for like the first time we've seen them play in overtime this year. That they've actually dominated play. They took their time. They exited the zone, came back in, waited for guys to change, and they got a lot of good opportunities. They end up couldn't beat Hellebuck in the end, but they end up getting the 2 points in the shootout. But it just made it so difficult for themselves in this game. But hey, you came out with the 2 points, so who cares?
Yeah. Exactly. They ended up, squeaking it out there. I was amazed sitting there watching the overtime. It was just weird because the Ducks basically played like a keep away game, and I'm like, why can't they do this all the time? Like they're sitting there, like you said, they've got somebody's got the puck. There's another guy on the ice. The third guy goes and changes out. They would circle in. If it wasn't good, they'd come back out of the zone. They'd change another player. They did that. I want to say for 2 or 3 minutes of that overtime, and they just tired out the Jets. I really thought the Ducks were going to get a goal in the overtime. The way that I don't know if the Jets were just tired or what, but they really manhandled them in that overtime. The Jets didn't even get a shot on goal. That was just crazy, and we've seen it before, and we've talked about this a bazillion times, how the Ducks are terrible in the 3-on-3. Honestly, Eddie, I think in all the 3-on-3s we've seen, other than ones where they scored goals and won, but in ones where they ended in a tie like this, I thought it was one of the best ones I've ever seen them play, 3-on-3.
Even the ones they've scored and won, I think this, they end up not getting a goal, obviously, in 3-on-3, but this is still one of the better times that they've had in overtime. Even games they've won in overtime. They just controlled play. They kept things simple. If it wasn't looking good, they didn't try and force the pass. They came out of the zone, made a change, came back in, looked for the safe pass, and it's disappointing they didn't score. Obviously, they end up winning the game, so it doesn't matter. But if this is something they can continue to do, and they haven't played 3-on-3 since, it's only been a couple games, but if they can come up in the next few games that they have overtime and play this well, finally we might see their overtime woes go the other way. So hopefully it's a trend that we can see continue.
Yeah, I was just amazed. I was happy, and then of course, Miller had to come in, and then he did what he almost always does, because he's just one of the best in the shootouts. So, good game for the Ducks. Like you said, some bad turnovers. they outshot Winnipeg. They only held the Jets to 27 shots, which is really good. Like we talked about, the Jets being one of the best teams in the Western Conference and the league. So they did good in that sense. The Ducks came up short on the power play. They had 4 chances, didn't score. Another thing in this game was kind of interesting was Kessler's goal, Eddie. He got the puck and turned and fired it. I remember we were sitting there and we were like, how did that go in? Like, it was kind of a strange goal. I mean, he just turns and wheels it and it just ends up going in. It proves, like they said, sometimes just shoot the puck, So that was it would have been the game-winning goal, but of course the Jets came back and scored right away. So a very entertaining game again. This was also the Ducks' 500th home win at Honda Center, Eddie.
Yeah, and if things couldn't get crazier, I mean, Wheeler ends up wiping out and taking John Gibson out of the game at the time, and we thought, it didn't look good because rarely does Gibby leave the game if he thinks he could stay in. And it looked pretty bad, to be honest. I mean, Wheeler toe picks in front of the net and takes out Gibson's knee, it looks like, and this is going right into the All-Star break, so we were all panicking, thinking Gibson's going to be out long-term, and, like you said, Miller does come in, doesn't face a shot, still gets the win, but to add to all the craziness of this game and then the things going on, Gibby ends up getting hurt, and then at the time we didn't know for how long.
Yeah, and it was kind of, I guess, good timing, like you said, because the All-Star break came up. There, obviously, that weekend off, and there's literally no news about Gibson during this time. We're all like, okay, we're pretty much, thinking it's a knee, the way that the crash happened and everything. So, there's a break there, and then we focus on the All-Star game, which I like. I like the format. I like how they do the 3-on-3. I like how they have the division teams in each conference play, and then the winners of each play. Basically a 3-game 3-on-3 tournament, if you will, for the All-Star game. And I was happy to see how well Raquel did in this, Eddie, especially in the final game. He had 2 goals in there and an assist. We posted some of the videos up there on Twitter and Facebook. So I liked it. It was very, very entertaining. Of course, Raquel didn't get the MVP, which, I don't know, goes to the fan vote or whatever. I still think that he should have been considered stronger than that. That's the only thing. But again, it's the Ducks, and you know how that goes. Anaheim against the world, right? And not everybody is big fans of us. But what did you think of the All-Star weekend? It was pretty entertaining in my mind.
Yeah, I think it was better than recent years, but sometimes it just feels forced, I guess. Like the skills competition almost seems to get worse almost every year. They introduced the technology this year, so they took out the styrofoam in the accuracy shooting contest, and they had a couple new things. They had the goalie save streak, which is essentially just the shootout competition. They just changed a couple things around and lauded it as a new event, and they had the relay where now you have to flip the puck up and put it through the lights. That one was kind of interesting. And of course, they kept the hardest shot, fastest skater, and hardest shot. But I think it was fun to watch. I find it hard for myself to just continually stay engaged throughout the entire All-Star game. And it's been like that for 4 or 5 seasons. It just seems like it struggles to keep people invested in it. And I don't know if it's the players they invite or the way they present it or whatever. But the last one I remember having a lot of fun watching is when they did the player draft, where they did that on TV and Kessler was like the last guy picked and everybody made fun of him when he got a car or something. That's the last time I remember actually being engaged in the All-Star game. But as for the game, I think the game was a little bit better. I missed a little bit of the first game, and then I caught the last one where Raquel, in the final game, where Raquel had 2 goals and an assist, and honestly was surprised that the Pacific Division ended up winning it. I thought the Central, because of how stacked they were going to have a chance, or the Atlantic, because the 4 Lightning players would just go off being in Tampa Bay. But yeah, I think it was great. Disappointed that Raquel didn't get the MVP, like you said, but when it comes down to a fan vote, I think there was a lot more people who were going to vote for Brock Besser over Raquel, and obviously Brock Besser gets the MVP. Not that it was necessarily undeserving, because Brock Besser did have a good 2 games as well, but Raquel was arguably the best player in that last game, so a little bit disappointing. But like you said, as a Ducks player, it's going to be hard for him to get votes to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing I'm sure a lot of you out there thought that was kind of weird in this was Drew Doughty playing with Raquel, Eddie,
and
then high-fiving each other. Yeah. High-fiving each other. Like, I remember people were like, I remember seeing some of the photos on Twitter and then just seeing the reactions where I was sitting there like, really? Did you ever think that Drew Doughty and Rickard Rakell would high-five each other on a play? I mean, obviously it's not going to happen in the regular season. I really doubt either one is going to the other team. But that was kind of weird for me, too. I just sitting there going, really? Like, I don't know. Like, you're so used to as a Duck fan, that you just want to, you know what I mean? You're just tired, and seeing the way, I mean, of course he's a good player and he gets under your skin, so that was just something for me that I noticed that a lot of fans had reacted to, and I agree. It's just like awkward. I don't know. What'd you think, Eddie?
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to see that other than in All-Star games, so I think it was a little bit weird. And I mean, Raquel played on the line with Doughty and Anze Kopitar, so that's even weirder, I guess, if you want to consider that. But, I think if to top it all off, if it was Perry who was there high-fiving Doughty, I think that might be a little bit. I don't know if that even would have happened if it was Perry and Doughty. I think they still would have been, they would have been having fun, and of course they've played together before, Team Canada, but still, I think it would have been a little bit less happy if it was those two on the ice.
Yeah, well, they hang out, off ice too. But I mean, yeah, it definitely people would have been, all the Kings fans would have been like, "What the hell with Perry?" We would have been like, "What with Doughty?" I don't know, but yeah, that was kind of awkward. That part of it. Obviously enjoyed watching Raquel and how well he did, and then seeing the Pacific team win. So that was all good. But yeah, so I mean, that was the All-Star weekend. Like you said, the skills competition. I agree with you. It's kind of like, I honestly didn't watch a whole lot of that. I'm not really, I don't know. Some of it to me is just kind of like, yeah, it's okay, and other parts of it are somewhat exciting. I mean, Raquel was in there on some of it, so it made it a little bit more interesting. But I agree with you. The skills part maybe needs a little bit changing. I do like the 3-on-3 tournament though, so it's a little bit more exciting. So, but that was the All-Star weekend, and the Ducks came out of that this week. They played Boston. We didn't know what was going to happen with Gibson. Then we hear, well, he's just starting. He's fine. We're like, okay, so nothing's wrong with him. And like the Jets, Boston has been playing super well. They were 8-0-2 in their last 10. They had an 18-point game streak entering this game. Another one where you thought, okay, I wonder how the Ducks are going to do in this one, and they actually did pretty well. Eddie, they got 2 goals right off the bat in the first period. The Bruins did get a late goal, made a little bit of nervous time, but the Ducks still pulled this one out 3-1. Henrique had 2 goals in this game. And a good game for the Ducks. The only bad part, of course, Eddie, is Gibson goes down in this game and Miller had to come back in. So kind of back to the drawing board in that situation. But a good win against another solid team in the league.
Yeah, and even with Marchand out of the lineup, obviously, if you didn't know, he was suspended for an elbow, so he's out for 5 games. I think that was his second game served of the 5-game suspension. So he was out. Charlie McAvoy was out, who eats the second most minutes for the Bruins on the blue line. So they had a couple guys out. Tuukka Rask didn't start. It was Ducks legend Anton Hudobin who was in that for the Bruins in this one. So they had a lot of things going against them, but this is still a great team. I mean, like you said, they're 14-0-4 in their last 18 games. I think it was I had to watch the Boston feed, unfortunately, when I was watching the game, so I had to deal with Jack Edwards, and it was a little bit disappointing. But they were saying it was, I think, the longest point streak since the 60s. So the Bruins have been on fire in their last 18 games. And I was surprised the way the Ducks started this game. About until 5 minutes into the second period, it was all Ducks. They controlled the game. They had the first 2 goals. The first period was theirs completely. 5 minutes into the second period, they were still playing well, and then the Bruins flipped the switch, and they pretty much controlled the rest of the game. And that's the type of hockey they play. I mean, they control play 5-on-5. They've done that all season. Bergeron and Pasternak were playing with Danton Heinen, and Jake DeBrusk was up there a couple times on their line, and they controlled play for the rest of the game pretty much from that point on. And I think the Ducks did something we haven't seen them do with a lead for a while, and they're actually able to hold on and not allow a goal until obviously the net was empty for Boston late in the last final minute of the third period. But I think it was a good effort for them to hold on. It's a tough team. It's one of the best teams in the NHL, especially the best team in the last 18 to 20 games. Like I said, they hadn't lost in regulation until this one. So a gutsy effort to take that 2-0 lead, hold on, and get the 2 points in this one.
I think you talk about holding on, and I think some of you out there will agree with me on this. That's when I get nervous. I
Yeah.
like when the Ducks, of course, get a lead early. Obviously, I mean, anybody on any team that you like, of course, when you get a lead coming out of the first period, whether it's a 1 goal or 2 or 3 goals, or in this game it was 2. But that's, I think, one critique that we've talked about with this Ducks team is that it seems like they'll get a lead and then they'll be fine either halfway through the game, maybe through 2 periods, and then the third period is kind of like, okay, we're just gonna hang on to the lead. And it just drives me nuts. I can't stand that. Like, it's like, sitting there yelling at the TV, or you're at the game and the fans near me are yelling too, attack, attack, go that way, go that way. Everybody's getting all, pissed off because they'll play 30 or 40 minutes, have a lead. They'll be working the forecheck, like you talked about. They'll play well 5-on-5. And then it's like they get into like a comfort zone sometimes later on. And I mean, granted, this is Boston, and they play in a really good, team that's, been just a crazy streak, which we took out, which was great, that the Ducks were able to do that. But I get a little nervous with that, Eddie. I just wish the Ducks would still at least create some opportunities when they do get a lead. This game was a little bit weird because it was the second period, but usually we've seen that in the third period this season, where you're kind of sitting there going, okay, Ducks, generate some offense. Don't just rely on hanging back and hoping that Gibson or Miller is going to win the rest of the way.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised the Ducks were even able to dictate play for the time that they did. They were beating Boston at their own game for 25 minutes of this game, which is impressive, especially the way Boston is set up. But yeah, I think a lot of the credit has to go to John Gibson in this game. Another unbelievable game for him. Unfortunately, he left the game with an injury, which we still haven't heard too much of an update on, so we don't really have any news on that. But he was stellar in this game. He made a lot of great saves. There was one where Pasternak had a 2-on-1, decided to shoot it, and Gibson just got a small piece of it and was able to fight it off. And he got hurt it looked like off a Bergeron shot, but I think he ended up getting like overstretching or something. It looks like a groin or a knee. We'll get into that a little bit later, and I'm sure there's some questions about it. But yeah, he gutted it out. He was clearly in pain for most of the third period. Was still making save after save. Tried to stack the pads, which Fowler blocked over the net too, with this apparent injury. And he just fought it out, and he's always done that. I mean, anytime he's injured, he tries to stay in the game if he can. And I think when he was eventually pulled out, I'm sure that was a coaching or trainer decision, because he probably would have stayed in if he could have.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe it could have been worse, because we know in the past that he's had some kind of groin issue pulls here and there. And I mean, that's not uncommon for a lot of goalies. We've seen that. Obviously, they're doing the splits, they're doing the half splits, they're doing all the stuff, bending all these different ways, trying to make saves and different things that had happened. So hopefully it's not that, but if it is, I wouldn't be too surprised. But yeah, another good game. The Ducks pull us out, as we talked about before. They're tied with the Kings and Sharks now in the Pacific. They're fighting it out. Obviously, a couple games more played, so that kind of works against them. But the Ducks, with this new lineup, I mean, they've won 3 in a row now, so they going with this forward group that they've got, switched on the right wing there on all 4 of the spots, and it's worked, and it's been good. So the Ducks still fighting it out. And they're going to have some key games that we'll talk about coming up here in this week. But one thing I did want to talk about in this game that was funny, and it's kind of a little segment on the fans, I guess. I guess the lone Brave fan at the game there in Boston, that he catches the puck. I forgot, someone sent us the video. We retweeted it, and not only does the fan catch the puck, he's wearing all orange. Mind you, he's in Boston, and he turns around and just like gets all crazy. I was just like, wow, Eddie, I give him a Brave award for fans. I don't know if I would do that. I mean, I definitely would catch the puck and be excited, but Boston's a tough crowd, Eddie, so I give the guy credit for holding it up there and being like, look at me, guys, especially because the Ducks won too.
To top it all off too, he was wearing a Kessler jersey, so he was just antagonizing the crowd in the perfect jersey too. And he catches the puck, turns around, and just taunts the fans, and there's a chorus of boos that rained down on him, and it was just great. I mean, he was a hero from that game, because right away you go on Twitter and there was 1,000 gifs of him with him celebrating with the puck, and it made it onto Sportsnet and up here, and it was pretty much everywhere. So he was the Ducks hero of that game, and I'm going to credit him with the reason they were able to hold on and win this game. But yeah, I mean, he was great. We saw a fan earlier this week. I can't remember what game it was, but he had a beer on the side part of the boards, and that's where you never want to leave a beer. And I don't know what game it was, I can't remember, but I remember seeing it, and two players collide into the boards and knock his beer over, and obviously he's not happy because that's probably about $20 down the drain. But let's be honest, if you're going to leave your beer on the side of the boards, you're pretty much guaranteed that it's going to get knocked over at some point. So I don't think he really has any reason to get mad.
Yeah, that's our bonehead fan award for this week. That was on the NHL's Twitter. And I remember it was Ottawa, Minnesota, Eddie. That was the game.
Oh, okay.
That's what it was. But, right, they show this fan. He's sitting in the corner, and a couple of the players run over there. And then all of a sudden you see the beer fall back on his hand, and it looks like his right pant leg. And then the funny part is if you missed it, you got to go back and watch it. You see the guy stand up. The look on his face is just priceless. He's just so pissed off. It's hilarious. And then there's a guy sitting like 2 or 3 seats to the left, and he's just laughing his ass off. I mean, it's just
he knows.
But and I'm like there's just one rule in hockey when you sit on the boards: you never, even if it's not a beer, any kind of drink, you don't put your drink on the ledge during the game. Come on now, you know that something's going to happen. Someone's going to run by you. The boards are going to shake when the puck hits it or a check. I mean, come on, man. The bonehead award right there for that fan. But if you missed it, it's on the NHL Twitter. I want to say maybe like 5 or 6 days ago. It's pretty funny. I think we quoted it too, so it might be on our timeline. I think we tweeted it out with a quote saying "rookie mistake." That's what we had put on there. So those are some of our fan awards that we're giving out for this past week. But yeah, I mean, don't ever do that. Don't put your beer on the boards. Come on, man. Plus, it's overpriced, as we all know, anyway. So. With that, we'll go with our fan question segment. We've got plenty of good questions. We'll start off. We actually have a couple, Eddie, about Henrique, and also ties into Silfverberg. We had Larry asks us about both of the players and if we'd be able to keep both for long-term deals. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other factors to consider with the cap, all the RFAs and things that are going to come up in the summer and the trade deadline, which is coming up. But he thinks that we can't afford both. So if we had to choose one, who would you go with? And I think that's a tough question because I would have said, obviously in the beginning, I would have said Silfverberg. But the way Henrique is playing, I would lean towards Henrique. But it's tough. I like both of them, Eddie.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. You know, Silfverberg hasn't had a great season offensively this year, so it's easy to say, yeah, we'll go for Henrique and we'll bring him back. But you know, I don't see that it's impossible to bring both of them back. You know, Silfverberg's making $3.75 until 2019-2020, and Henrique is UFA at the same time, and he's making $4 million. By the time they're up, the cap will have increased by a significant amount at least. And you would expect that they would want to bring both of them back. You don't know the state of the Ducks roster, but it's most likely going to look pretty similar to this, obviously, because Raquel is signed past then. Kessler, Getzlaf, and Corey Perry are all signed past that point. Eves is signed past that point if he's able to return. Cogliano is signed past that point. And then obviously on defense, you've got Lindholm, Fowler, and Manson, and presumably after this season, Montour, who will all be locked down after that point as well. So the team will look relatively the same 2 years from now. And whether they have the cap space or not, it's hard to really decide. I think just by looking at the players the Ducks have in their system, that they would rather try and keep around a guy like Jakob Silfverberg. They're a little bit short on players who can play wing. Obviously, Max Jones and Maxime Comtois are two guys who can play on the left wing. Comtois can also play on the right and sometimes in center. So you've got some wingers coming up. Steele projected as most likely a guy who's going to play center in the National Hockey League. You've got Antoine Morin, who is a center in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, but he could play wing as well. But I think, you know, Henrique's been great, but I think if I had to choose one, I'd have to choose Jakob Silfverberg. And I think that's just to keep together Cogliano, Kessler, and Silfverberg and really keep that line going a couple seasons from now. But it's tough. I mean, Henrique's been great. He's on a 6-game point streak. He's got 6 goals, 2 assists. And this is the second streak he's had since coming to the Ducks, and he's been a revelation. You know, he's really the most productive guy the Ducks have had on their bottom 6 in a while, and you know, since pretty much, I'd have to look at it to be 100% sure, but really since Nick Bonino and the production he had in the Ducks' bottom 6.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Henrique too, I mean, 11 goals, 6 assists in 26 games. I mean, he's up there. I mean, the only other ones with more goals are Raquel, Silfverberg, and Casse. And I mean, technically, I mean, Henrique has more goals than that because, you know, obviously would have coming over in the trade. But I mean, he's one of the Ducks' top scorers right now, and the Ducks have been doing well since he's come over. I don't have the exact stat; I have to look it up. But I know that since he's joined the Ducks, the Ducks have been on the positive side of that trade, which was another fan question: is Vatanin's, you know, not done as well with New Jersey? So he's looking good. I think that. Another question, kind of similar, Chris asked too, is will Henrique, you know, be given a long-term deal? And I think you pretty much covered all of that. But I would think that they would, but it's really going to come up to the trade deadline and what they're going to do, which we've talked about that. We have a couple more questions about, you know, are the Ducks going to do anything? What are some moves? You and I have talked about it on, I think, maybe the last 2 or 3 podcasts. So there's not really a whole lot to discuss. Again, I don't really see a whole lot going on, especially with the way things are going now. I think you and I talked about it, and really the big area to address would be more the defense, if anything, right now. As we talked about with Boschman and Bieksa being that third pairing, and then obviously Holzer rotating in, would be something that the Ducks might do, Eddie, on as far as on defense coming up. But otherwise, I would think that the Ducks would try and extend him. But you know, things can change, so we'll have to see what happens as this season unfolds.
Yeah, and I think another interesting thing to note in regards to either Adam Henrique or Jakob Silfverberg getting long-term contract extensions when their current deals are up is you got to look at some guys who are going to be almost on their entry-level contracts at that point, guys that we hope will do well for the Ducks in the next few seasons, and they could be due for at least a little bit of a raise or a significant raise depending on how well they play. And those 3 guys are Max Jones, and Sam Steele, and Jakob Larsson. And all of their entry-level contracts are up at the same year, which is in 2020-2021, which is a season after Henrique and Silfverberg's contracts expire. So that's something they'd have to take in consideration as well. If Sam Steele makes the team next year, the year after, and starts putting up, I don't want to project how many points he can put up, but if he starts producing at the same level that he's producing the WHL or anywhere close to that, you know, putting up 40, 50 points a season, he's going to be due for a raise after his entry-level contract. Max Jones, depending on his play, could be. And if Jakob Larsson eventually makes the team and either jumps into the Ducks' top 4 or solidifies a spot on their top 6 on defense, then it'll be interesting to see what kind of raise those guys get. And obviously that comes into consideration when you're looking at extending guys like Adam Henrique and Jakob Silfverberg.
Definitely, and you know, to touch on that too, I looked up that stat. I couldn't remember what it was, but with Henrique on the Ducks, Eddie, the Ducks are 14-7-5 in those 26 games. So, you know, obviously you got to throw that in there and look at it. I mean, not one player makes a team, of course, but that's definitely a key factor. And then, of course, like you said, Silfverberg, Cogliano, and Kessler on that line as well. So some things to consider, some things to think about for sure. But I would like, if we could, my answer would be keep both. But, you know, that's not always going to be the way it's going to work out, especially with the finances. And like you said, you've got Steele and Jones, these other guys coming up that are going to be dynamite. So we'll have to see how that goes. Some of the other questions, it looks like we covered more, but I think you had 1 or 2 more questions, Eddie, that we can answer.
Yeah, I got asked a couple questions on Twitter about a week ago before, so I just saved them in here because I knew they'd come up probably. So same person, Erhick on Twitter, asked me 2 questions. So the first one pertaining to Jakob Silfverberg, so it's a little bit relevant from the last question we had, was do you think he'll ever be a 30 to 40 goal scorer, or is he kind of is what he is now in that checking role? And that's kind of interesting because we brought this up, I don't know, it's probably last year or 2 years ago. It seems to come up at the beginning of every season if you and me think Silfverberg can finally hit 30 to 40 goals. And I think every time we've said yes, and he's never come out to that. So do you think he still has that potential, or now at 27 is he kind of at where he's at?
See, and that's what I factor into my decision why I'm kind of lean more towards Henrique, because I know you and I were really high on Silverberg, and we thought he would get that, high of a number as far as, his goal totals. And like you said, it hasn't been there. I mean, this season he's got 12. He could maybe get 20, 25, we hope. But then it's also the part that's difficult is then you got, like they're talking about, is the defensive value of Silverberg. So I guess you got to kind of weigh it out. Henrique does bring the value of playing center too. So they're a little bit different, you know what I mean, in terms of how you'd weigh him out. I would lean more towards Henrique just because of his value as being center and whatnot. But it's tough, Eddie. Like you said, you can't discount Silverberg's role on that line with Kessler. But as we've seen right now, he hasn't been on that line. It's been Brown. So if it stays like that the rest of the season, it kind of gives me a little bit more towards, hey, I'd keep Henrique. But of course, Silverberg is a fan favorite, and we like him as well. So I would go with Henrique at this point right now. But like I said, in a perfect world, I keep both.
Yeah, and do you think he ever can hit 30? Do you think he ever gets 30 or 40?
You and I talked about this before. I really would think that he would, but I don't think he does. I think Silverberg will get somewhere between 20 or 25 for the next couple seasons. That's what I think.
Yeah, he seems like that type of player who will be one of those guys who can hit 20 pretty much every season. And then maybe he'll have that one season where everything just clicks, and because of his release, he can get to, I think he has the ability to get to 30.
Yes.
But not a perennial 30 goal scorer. I think he'll, I don't want to compare him to anybody, but a guy like, they're not similar in the way they play, but Michael Grabner is a guy that usually gets 20 every season, and then one season he'll hit 30 or 40 just because of the season he had, just had a great season. I think that's the type of production you could see from Jakob Silverberg, sorry, but there's nothing wrong with getting 20 goals every season. I mean, that's great production, and that's something the Ducks could use. So I think that's something you have to take into account as well. The second question, not related, but from Erhik as well, is who is one player you wish the Ducks could have held on to from recent past? And he named some like Bobby Ryan, Matt Bolesky, Hagelin, and his pick was Kyle Palmieri. So who would you wish the Ducks could have held on to?
That's a big one. Kyle Palmieri, obviously when he went over to New Jersey and all that happened, everybody was upset. So, I mean, that one was a tough one. I know another one you and I talked about was Shea Theodore. That was one that if we kept him, though, would have caused some issues on the defense. Honestly, the one that I've been looking at, Eddie, is William Karlsson. I mean, this guy has just gone off in Vegas. And, I mean, of course, we don't know if he would have had the same production on the Ducks. But, I mean, man, if he would have had anything close to that, that would have been huge for Anaheim. So, Wild Bill is the guy that I would pick right now.
Yeah, and, when I answered him on Twitter, I said, for me, it's either William Karlsson or Shea Theodore. And you look at Shea Theodore and you kind of say, well, somebody was going. It's either Vatanen, right, Manson, Theodore, Montour. Somebody had to go in that situation. So it's hard to say, yeah, Shea Theodore is an easy one. But you look at William Karlsson, and I have to agree with you. I mean, it's a trade that at the time it made sense. We're making a push for the playoffs, needed some help on defense. So bringing a guy like James Wisniewski, dumping Rene Bourque's contract, it all kind of made sense. But now you look at it and you say, well, look at what Karlsson's doing with Vegas and how well he's playing, the amount of goals he's scoring. The Ducks could use a guy like that on their second or third line. Or even, I mean, imagine Getzlaf playing with, I know Karlsson's the center, but imagine Getzlaf playing with Karlsson and Raquel right now. How great that would be, and the production from that line, and how much of a boost he would be to this lineup. And nobody knew he was going to be anything close to what he's doing right now at that point. And it was really either him or Raquel. If you think way back to when that trade was made, Raquel was just breaking onto the scene. So was Karlsson, and it was kind of which one is going to be the better pick. And of course, we're all happy they held on to Rickard Raquel. But just imagine what this Ducks team could look like if they had both of or if they had Raquel and Karlsson in the lineup.
I hate these questions sometimes, Eddie. I hate these ones because you look at, if you're not following Karlsson right now, or maybe you're not following the Vegas Knights because they're in first, and of course you're trying to catch them, which is going to be tough. But He's played 49 games, and he's got 44 points, 27 goals, 17 assists. I mean, tearing it up is to put it mildly. I mean, he's doing awesome. So, of course, like we said, to known that he would do that in Vegas and all that. I mean, that's before we even knew Vegas was a team. So I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. But it's tough when you're talking about Raquel and Carlson. Of course, I'm happy we have Raquel. And again, like I said, if we could have both, I'd have both. Just like I want to have Silverberg and Henrique going forward, having both. It's tough. I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't want to be a GM. Playing armchair GM is kind of something we do on some of these shows. We'll talk about some of these moves and things like that. And I mean, it's tough. I mean, you make these moves, and just with players in general, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's just like the draft too, Eddie. You draft a player, you think he's going to be awesome, and then he's either okay or he's terrible. And then you pick some other guy that you have some hope for, and then he becomes a star. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough job, and trying to decide who to pick. I mean, it's difficult. But yeah, Carlson's the one, man, that he's just been tearing it up, Eddie.
Yeah, and you never know, like you said. I mean, when that trade was made, Carlson was playing well, but not anywhere close to what he is now, and nobody knew that he was going to come out and have this type of season with Vegas. He was doing okay in Columbus too, but he wasn't doing this. And I think it's just the fact that his role's been elevated, and he's essentially playing on a first line with Jonathan Marchessault as well. He's finally been able to get those minutes to show what he can do. And whether this is something he can do for the rest of his career, I don't know. The whole team in Vegas is playing great, and everybody's playing, I think, above their natural ability. But I kudos to him and the way that he's played, and for Vegas to go get him from Columbus, and for Columbus to leave him exposed. I'm sure they're a little bit unhappy right now. And then again, you look at the Florida Panthers pretty much handing Vegas Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith. So yeah, I mean, they got a little bit lucky, I guess you could say. So
yep,
their top six essentially was handed to them by two teams, but. Just to finish out the fan questions here, I'm going to mail in my own question. One thing I noticed from two games, the game against the Rangers, the game against the Jets, were the disparity in what's considered a penalty shot in the National Hockey League now. There were similar plays in those back-to-back games where the Ducks had a breakaway. Was either I don't know I can't remember the exact plays and which player it was, but they had a breakaway in each of those games. Clear cut breakaway where either a penalty was taken by a Rangers player, and there was a penalty, a minor called on the play, but they were both clear cut breakaways. And then you look, and there was a game, I think it was either the same night or the night after, where Toronto played Chicago, and Nylander got a penalty shot on a clear cut breakaway in overtime. And he was given the penalty shot and ended up scoring and winning the game. And I'm not saying it's a Ducks versus Leafs and this team gets more penalty shots than the other one. I think it becomes inconsistent in what's considered a penalty shot. I don't even know what's considered a penalty shot, because I assumed it was if you're in a clear-cut breakaway and a player interferes with that with any kind of penalty, slashing, hooking, holding, tripping, whatever, then it's a penalty shot. And it's not just in Ducks games. It just kind of came up like that was back-to-back games, so it popped in my head. But I've seen it multiple times this season where a guy's on a breakaway, clear-cut, and is interfered with, and no penalty shot. Like I don't even know what a penalty shot is anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's weird sometimes watching these games, and most of the time I'll give the refs the credit. They do at least call a penalty on it. Most of the time, obviously there's a couple times they don't, but I think they get it right in at least doing that. But I agree with you. It seems like what is or isn't a penalty shot is kind of up in the air, because if a player has the defender behind him, nobody in between himself and the goalie, and he's going to make a shot, and that player behind him in some way interferes with the shot, whether it's hooking, holding, tripping, whatever it is, that's pretty much my understanding of what a penalty shot is. But like you said, sometimes you watch these plays and they'll call the hooking, and especially to me, like if a player has that opportunity and they don't even get the shot off at all, I mean, that to me is just a straight up automatic penalty shot. It doesn't matter if it was a hooking or a tripping or whatever they did, holding. I mean, that should be automatic. If they get the shot off, then to me it still should be. I mean, even if they're interfered with. But I don't know if that's what the refs are looking at or whatnot, because it seems like sometimes when a player is actually gets the shot, they'll just call the 2-minute penalty instead. It's just something I've kind of noticed here and there. But like you said, there isn't really any hard or fast like patterns I've seen. It's something that like you said, Eddie. It's I don't know. It's just inconsistent.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fact you see it a lot in soccer with penalty shots given. Sometimes refs, if a ball hits a player's hand in soccer, if it's intentional, they'll give a penalty shot. If they deem it not intentional, then play will play on. And I think pressure comes into play in both of those situations. If the ref calls a penalty shot in hockey or in soccer, you're giving them a free chance at a goal. And I think it's a tough call to make. And I think a call that a lot of refs don't want to have to make. I think they'd rather give the 2-minute minor, get away with it. The team has a power play. If they score, whatever, it was a penalty, so that's fine. I think giving the penalty shot is just a tough call for a lot of referees to make because it's such a easy chance at a goal. Essentially, it's such a big play in the game, a game that can a play that can change momentum. It's something that's a little bit more headlining than, of course, a power play. And I think that kind of pressure plays a big role in whether the ref is going to call a penalty shot or not.
I agree, absolutely, and it's something that's should be looked at again. It's something that's a little bit inconsistent in the way it's dealt with. And speaking of inconsistency, Eddie, our friend George Peros was back in the news. He actually decided to speak out about his decision on the Cogliano suspension and the fine only on Brown. And if you read the article on NHL.com, I'm sure you were super happy with his explanation. It was super thorough and well educated. Not. And it's just frustrating, Eddie. I think, God, I don't even know where to start with this. But for those of you that didn't read it, please, if you want, go read it. Unless you're going to get upset, then don't. Which I got upset, and I saw a lot of people get upset as well. I think it would have been better, Ed, if Peros just wouldn't have responded. I think his discussion of it was kind of a circular discussion. He was saying that the Brown and the Cogliano hits weren't the same. They weren't. It should have been the other way around. As we talked about in this show, which a lot of people didn't talk about in the Cogliano play, Kempe tries to avoid the check. His own stick hits himself in the nose, which is why it looked a lot worse than it really was. I don't know. It's just I just think that it would have been better not even having a little presser on this, Eddie, because I just think that it just made it worse than what it already was. It was better if he would have just let it die and move on.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a position where, essentially you don't have to explain yourself.
Right.
I mean, you made the call. You should stand by the call. You shouldn't have to come out and explain yourself, no matter the backlash. And I get, maybe his thought process behind it. He sees the backlash, not just from regular people, from guys like Bob McKenzie and Ray Ferraro and other big guys, Timu and other big guys in the media as well. Is I get it. It was a bigger reaction, and a lot of it had to do with the streak and everything for Cogliano. But there's no real need for him to come out and say anything. He made a statement by suspending Cogliano, choosing not to suspend Giordano, and fining Dustin Brown. There was no and say anything, because essentially, his actions as head of Department of Player Safety should speak for him. And I don't really see why he had to. I get his thought process behind it, but it was kind of pointless, and like you said, just kind of walking in circles and telling us something we already really know.
Yeah, I think it wasn't beneficial at all. I mean, it just made everybody more irritated, I think, because you're standing by your decision, which, like you said, I mean, I get that whole point of it, but unless you have something concrete to really add to help make the fans understand why you did what you did, which there's none of that in that article. If you read and see what he says, there's nothing. I don't know. So kind of disappointing. I like the fact that he thought about it and wanted to make an effort to try and do it, but it was just a thought. I think as far as the way it was handled, the delivery was terrible. I just think it was pointless beyond that point. I think if he would have had something to really justify what he was, or you know what, even Eddie, if he would have come out and said, you know what, yeah, maybe I should have, done something a little bit this way or that way, not necessarily saying he made a complete mistake, but at least saying, yeah, we should redo some things. But he didn't even do any of that. He's just like, nope, this is my decision. And yeah, the contact here and there and there. And we're like, well, yeah, we saw that, but did you not see Brown hit the guy face first into the boards? I mean, that's a lot worse than what Cogdon's hit was. I don't care what anybody says, whether you're a Ducks fan, a Kings fan, any kind of fan. You watch those plays, checking somebody face first while they're on their knees into the boards. I mean, give me a break. That's a super dangerous play. Where Cogdon, yeah, he had a shoulder that got a little high towards the chin area of Kempe, but like I said, his own stick is what caused all the bleeding on his nose and everything like that. And it seems like nobody took that into account. So, it's just frustrating. I'm hoping that something changes along with, like you said, the penalty shot thing. So that was kind of the little bit of news that came out recently this week that, obviously everybody was just sitting there going, okay, whatever. So hopefully nothing else will be said, and maybe some of the other decisions will be better this season. But with that, we'll finish up the show with the road trip that's still going on, Eddie. The Ducks are going to play Ottawa this week. They got Montreal, Toronto, Buffalo. Some very winnable games, Eddie, the Ducks, as they're continuing this battle for the wild card or the second or third spot in the Pacific. What are your thoughts? If you look at these 4 games, it looks like the Ducks should be able to win at least 2 or 3 of these.
Yeah, I think one thing we have to touch on before we move on from the player safety thing. I think a lot of people are up in arms about the Nick Ritchie hit in the game
right.
against Boston. I mean, it's a tough play because if you look at it from a couple of angles, you look at it from the front, and he comes in a little bit late, and it looks like he catches Backes in the shoulder. But then you look at it from a different angle from the side, and it kind of looks like he catches him in the head. I'm sure you've seen the play a couple times,
yep.
And it's a tough one to call. And the interesting thing too is he gets no penalty on the play, and so far I haven't heard of any supplemental discipline going towards Nick Ritchie at all. And I don't think it's an easy one to judge. Backes kind of whiffs on a pass, and then he kind of comes in to the shoulder, but then lifts his elbow up and kind of catches Backes in the head. I mean, it's a tough one to call. I don't know. I don't know what you would think on a hit like this either.
Yeah, I mean, being fair, I was really surprised he didn't get any penalty at all.
Yeah.
I really was. I mean, just being fair, not trying to be a homer or anything, but yeah, I mean, nothing happened.
At least an interference penalty or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought at least the result of that play would have been 2 minutes, and so there was nothing, and it was just kind of like, okay, and like you said, we haven't heard a review or anything, so it just goes back to the whole thing of it being inconsistent. There's just, if there's, like we talked about, there's got to be some parameters set up if there's headshots or there's 5-minute majors or not necessarily a headshot but head contact, stuff like that. It's got to be set up because, again, plays like that, I don't think that was a dirty play or a suspensionable play or anything like that, but it was definitely one that to me at least warranted at least a 2-minute penalty, Eddie. So but it's not reviewed, so it's just it goes back to what we constantly keep seeing here is just stuff like this happens, and either the play is not reviewed when we think maybe it should have been, or then it's vice versa. And it's unfortunate because all of you out there, you all know about it, and it's just something that we're going to have to constantly deal with, whether you're a fan of the Ducks or any other team in the league.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was definitely warranted of an interference penalty at least in the game. I mean, we've seen worse in players of getting a 5 or getting kicked out of the game, getting a 10-minute game misconduct or more. And, you see him get away with no penalty and then nothing today at least. And I think if there was going to be any discipline, we would have heard of something today. So I don't think anything's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, it's, it kind of speaks again to the inconsistency. I do not believe that it should have been a suspendable hit or even a fine, but just no penalty on the play. And really, Backes was hurt on this play too, and he's listed as day-to-day now. So it's just kind of an interesting decision. But yeah, to get back to the Ducks road trip coming up, they sit, like you said, they sit tied for a wild card spot with Minnesota Wild. They're tied with the Kings and the Sharks on points. Obviously, the Kings have 1 game in hand, the Sharks have 2 games in hand, and they sit 1 point behind Dallas for the first wild card spot, and they've played the same amount of games. So the Ducks have really gained some ground in the last 6 games, where they've won 5 of their last 6. And they're going to play some teams that you would suspect it should be a pretty winnable week, because if you go and you look at the Eastern Conference, 3 of the Ducks' 4 games this week are against the bottom 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. They play Buffalo, they play Ottawa, and they play Montreal. You would expect them to at least win these games or get close to winning these games. I mean, these are 3 games they have to win, right?
That's what I'm thinking. I think the only real question this week is who goes in net, Toronto and Buffalo, because those are the back-to-back situation. If he's going to go with Gibson against Toronto or he's going to go with Miller. I mean, because obviously he'll most likely, Carlisle will put the opposite in against Buffalo. So I think he might go with Gibson because, of course, he's going to go against some of, your still fan favorite, Frederik Andersen, obviously being on the Leafs. But you may see a rematch of those two going at it on that day is maybe what will happen, and then Miller will go in that game against Buffalo, unless of course there's something more to Gibson which we haven't heard. It might, unless Miller ends up having to go in all of these games, which I'm confident with that happening. Obviously I don't hope that Gibson's anything long term with what happened in this last game, but I think that's just the decision that might have to be made. I think that the Ducks are very winnable. Like you said, Toronto's been playing extremely well. It's going to be a tough game. I think they should be able to take out the rest of these games. They're all pretty early games, too, keep in mind. The Ottawa, Toronto, Buffalo games are all 4 o'clock Pacific time. The Montreal game's at a weird time, Eddie, 10 a.m. I think there's something going on that day you know about.
That's early for you guys, and that's still early for me. That's a 1 p.m. game here for me.
Yeah.
So that's still a pretty early game.
Yeah.
But I mean it's some winnable games. I mean, the first game coming up especially, Ottawa's lost 6 in a row. So there's no excuse if you go into Ottawa and you lose that game. That has to be a win for the Ducks coming up on this most recent game.
Yeah, I have high hopes this week. So I would think the Ducks would at least win 3 of these games, if not 2 out of the 4, but they should win 3. Also, coming up too, there's another. The scheduling is very weird this month. There's another early game on the 17th. That Saturday they play Minnesota at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Weird, but we're gonna have a watch party that day at El Ranchito in Orange. Should be a lot of fun. Maybe some day drinking during that game will be going on.
Breakfast, lunch, watch party.
I know. It's a brunch watch party, I guess. Yeah, exactly. So we'll post some stuff on social media with that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to wrap up the show. We're going to be doing a couple things differently. Eddie and I are looking at doing some live shows. Just finding the correct application to use and get back to doing some of those things that we've done before. So we'll post some updates on that and some times. We'll try and figure out what's a good time. We're looking at maybe Fridays or Saturdays, kind of depending on everybody's work schedule and how that works. We'll put out some posts asking you guys, what do you think? What's a good time, obviously. And look forward to that. We haven't done those in a while, Eddie, so it should be fun trying to do a little bit of live discussion on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we did way back when we first started, when we had a little bit more time, and Blab was our post-game live show. We did that for for half a season. We did that until Blab got shut down, and that kind of threw that in a wrench. And something we can look forward to again, hopefully, if our schedule's permitted this year, is another live trade deadline show, because we love doing that. And we had Phil Hewlett on one year, and then there's the 1 year where I was out in a blizzard. And so those ones are always fun because we get a bunch of people on, and we kind of sit there for 3 hours when nothing happens in the morning and none of the trades, and then they all start flooding in at around 4 o'clock when the deadline closes, and we get a bunch of there. So that will be fun. We've been looking into, like Mike said, doing some more live video shows or live podcasts in general. But it comes down to finding a program that works, because Blab is no longer available. So we'll look into that, and we've obviously got the podcast up on SoundCloud now. We're trying to see if we can continue doing that. We've obviously got it up on iTunes. We got it up on Podomatic. So if you can either go see it on there. If you're going on iTunes and you want to leave us a review or leave a rating or whatever, it helps the show a lot. It gets it out there for everybody to see. So greatly appreciate it if you guys decide to do that.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll be back most likely in a week, probably after this road trip. And let's go Ducks.